Welcome to Fitzdog Radio. I think I look a little pale. Look a touch pale with this lighting here I'm in my bonus room of my house. I just took a nap, so I'm a little groggy. Naps, overrated. No matter how tired I am, I feel like I'm better off muscling through. I laid down for what I thought would be 10 minutes, and I woke up like an hour and 15 minutes later, and like I just got out of a coma. Like I felt like Bill Cosby should have been standing over me pulling up his fly. Like I was checking my privates to see if they felt violated. And now I just got kicked off the algorithm on YouTube. Got to worry about that. Reggie Watts is my guest today. Holy shit, I've been looking forward to this. I read his book this week. It's amazing. We talk all about it. We'll get into that in a minute. But in the meantime, we got the Best Buddies benefit tomorrow night, my annual benefit that I throw for the Best Buddies. And I went on Corolla this week to promote it. I went on K-Rock, the local LA FM station. It's sold out now. Sorry, you can't come, but come next year. Amazing lineup. We got Nikki Glazer. We got Andrew Santino, Bobby Lee, Ron Funches, Sarah Silverman, Annie Letterman, and a special guest, Chris Tenney, who you have not heard of, but Best Buddies is a group that helps people with intellectual disabilities, and Chris is on the spectrum, and he's done it every year. I don't know if he does any other shows. This might be the only show he does per year, but he gets very psyched up for it. His father helps him write material, and he crushes. He does really good. He's got smart jokes, and his delivery is fantastic, and the place goes crazy, and he's a good hang in the green room. He likes to hang out in the green room, and everybody talks to him. Norm Macdonald, God rest in peace. I guess about 3 or 4 years ago, he came down and did it. And Rogan was there, and Rogan smoked a blunt with Norm. And Norm's was not a big pot smoker. He smoked a little bit. So he smokes a fat joint and then another one. And then he says to Joe, "Do you have any more?" And Joe's like, "Yeah, I got some in my car. You want me to get it?" Norm's like, "Yeah." So he gets more pot. And then he starts talking to Chris Tenney. And I'm like, oh, this could get weird, but not weird at all. It was like Norm looked into Chris's soul and just connected with him. And it was like the most kind of beautiful exchange. It was like Norm was the spectrum whisperer. He just, I don't know. It's hard to describe. It was kind of magic. And then Norm went up on stage high out of his mind, made no fucking sense. He didn't care. The thing about Norm is he did not care if he bombed. He just he would just smile and just keep on going and just like ruminate on some weird ideas and see what happens. And anyways, that's tomorrow night. I had the big Christmas party weekend, a lot of Christmas parties. I don't know about you. I feel a little bit mixed about them. Some are good. My neighbor had a nice one. My next door neighbor had a great party. Hung out with all my neighbors. They had oysters, which was a nice touch. And you get to snoop around their houses. When you have a neighbor, you're constantly wondering what's going on in their house. So I looked around, didn't take any jewelry, but I looked around a little bit. Beautiful house. And they're lovely hosts. And it was really nice. And then I left and I went to a billionaire's mushroom party, which I can't say that phrase very often. But Tom O'Neill, author of Chaos, and Mike Gibbons, co-host of Sunday Papers, we headed off into Bel Air, and we went to a guy he's worth $10 billion. I'm not going to say who it is, because that's kind of one of those things, is when you go to a billionaire's party, you don't talk about them. I can say him. It's a he. And You know who he is, but I'm not going to say who it is. So we go in, and it's this insane party. You go in, and they have 2 different bars just with shrooms, with a shroom tender that sets you up with the right strain for what you want to experience. We went to both bars. We took some from each bar, and then there was a pot bar, 2 pot bars. There were flamethrowers. There was a tent where you could get a tattoo. All these people were lining up to get tattoos. Real tattoos, not henna. There was a DJ, which is always sad because nobody was dancing. It was a bunch of... The crowd was... This guy made his money in tech. And there was a lot of cocky tech geeks. There's nothing worse than a cocky geek, because even they know they don't fit in, but they've got the cool shirt and they've got the cool haircut and they've got the Asian girlfriend. It was a lot of that. It was 2/3 guys, and they all had Asian girlfriends. There was a Polynesian drum circle. There was you could get your aura photographed and read to you. There was a comedian who I'd never heard of, so I didn't go inside. There was a magician. There was a cigar shop. There was the most insane sushi bar. It was like the size of my house. And there were like 12 people making the most succulent, juicy, insane sushi you've ever had. Wine cellar. It went on and on. It just was crazy. Candy store. And so it got a little overwhelming, and then me and Gibbs snuck away, and there was a chess table in the middle of the main bar, and me and Gibbs played chess on shrooms, which was very enjoyable, and I made some bad moves, but I accepted it with grace. And what else did we do? Oh, and then I went to a Latka party, Latka Palooza. My friend lives up the street, and she had, it was very hot. We lit Hanukkah candles and saw some good friends. That was good. I skipped out on the Venice Boat Parade. They go through the canals every year, and they light them up, and there's music, and I don't know why. I was burnt, so I didn't go to that. I skipped the Comedy Store party, which I heard was insane. There was a fight. Somebody got banned for 3 months. There was, there's not a lot of sex at the Comedy Store. Like when you think of Christmas parties and people hooking up, nobody hooks up from the Comedy Store. It's more like people get fucked up, but there's no screwing around. As far as I know, what do I know? I'm the married guy. I'm the last guy to find out stuff like that. And instead, we just went to see Napoleon. I took my wife and daughter and her friends to see Napoleon, and it was good. Long, but that's not a critique. I don't consider a long movie a bad thing. If it's a good movie, let it be as long as it wants to be. Joaquin Phoenix is amazing, and the woman from The Crown, she plays Elizabeth's sister in The Crown. I should remember her name, but she's amazing. Worth seeing. All right, I don't want to waste a lot of time because I want to get to Reggie. We had a couple of overheards. This came from Brett Kerr. By the way, if you want to send me overheards, it is it's just the website is fitzdog.com. Go there, and there's a link. You can send them to me or email me, fitzdogradio@gmail.com. I reply to all emails. It might take a minute, but I get to them all. And Brett Kerr said, at a scrappy used tire place way outside of Boston, the mechanic said to his friend while I was waiting for a tire, quote, last time I saw my fucking brother was when... I should do a Boston accent. Last time I saw my fucking brother was when I had my foot on his neck outside the courthouse when my dad died. Wow. That doesn't sound like it's that far from Boston. That sounds like it's in South Boston. And maybe they were already scrapping about who got the car or who got the triple-decker in Dorchester. Triple-decker is a type of house in Dorchester. You live on the ground. No, you live in the second floor. You put your parents in the ground floor so they don't have to walk up any stairs. and then you got like an uncle and an aunt up on the third floor. It's a triple decker. And everybody pays the rent together, and everybody drives each other crazy. And the cops come. This one was from, where's your name? I lost it. Two women talking about decorating a Christmas tree. Oh, this is from Thomas Burr. Two women talking about decorating a Christmas tree. I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of ladders. I get that. Ladders are fucking tricky. And, you know, unless you got somebody holding the ladder, you shouldn't be on the ladder. My mom, I flew her out to San Francisco when I first made some money. When I very first made some money, I was about 29, and I was hosting a game show on MTV. So I flew my mom out to play Pebble Beach because she's a big golfer, and that's the best course in the country. So we flew out, and we're sitting there in business class, and this guy is sitting across from my mom on the aisle, and he goes, he starts asking us who we are and what I do. And I never tell anybody what I do because I don't want to talk about being a comedian on a plane because then it's a very one-sided conversation. I just get asked a lot of questions, and it's awkward. So the guy says, what do you do? And I said, and before I can answer, my mom goes, he's a comedian. And then the guy says, of course. He's like, so do you make a living? And my mom looks at him without missing a beat, and she goes, he's about halfway up the ladder. And I'm like, what? Half? Are we in fucking Coach, lady? Halfway up the ladder? First of all, I'm not on a ladder. A ladder is for a paper salesman. A ladder is for a guy in the insurance world. For comedians, there's no fucking ladder. Don't put me on the ladder. Anyway, speaking of comedy, I'm coming to you people. Fort Worth, Texas this weekend, December 15 and 16 at Hyenas. Milwaukee Improv, December 29th through the 31st, New Year's Eve. Den Theater in Chicago, January 13th, one of my favorite places to perform. Also coming in January, Atlanta, Portland, La Jolla, and Tampa. Go to Fitzdog.com for tickets. Also, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp, look, it is an amazing thing when you have a family and you want to get together. There's gift giving during the holidays. What do you exchange? How do you focus on this time together? My family, we don't really give gifts. The kids get gifts. I get my mom a gift, not my sister. We keep it really simple because we don't want to drive each other crazy. But then you get into politics but then the in-laws give presents, and my cousin Louie gives presents, and it's a nightmare. So it's all about give and take. It's about sharing and receiving, and sometimes I can bring stuff up. So go to therapy. Talk about it. Give yourself some love this holiday season. BetterHelp is a service that I used during the pandemic for 2 years. I got hooked up with an amazing therapist, which, by the way, you fill out a questionnaire and you talk about yourself, and then they pair you up with somebody who's appropriate, a licensed therapist with expertise in that area. If you don't like them, swap them out, no problem. It's easy. It's way cheaper than in-person therapy, and you're not driving through rush hour traffic. You're not sitting in awkward waiting rooms looking at people. It's on your own terms. So I can't think of a better way to start helping yourself than with them. In the season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Fitzdog today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Fitzdog. Also, you should not have to worry about buying tickets to an event. Everybody stresses out about the timing of it. Am I buying too early, too late? Am I getting screwed? Well, Game Time makes sure that it's a relaxing process, that you don't lose sight of the fact that you are spending money on something you will remember for the rest of your life. Game Time gives you last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, and this is for comedy. This is for music, sports, theater, anything you want. Game Time's got your back. You can take a look at the view from your seats from the app. The app's a piece of cake. Couple of taps, you got your tickets. No downloading, no transferring, no printing. It's easy. Right now, I'm looking at tickets on my phone for Rolling Stones. Right now, $80. They were $200 a couple weeks ago. So you track it, you pounce, and you get yourself something that you're going to enjoy. Don't buy things, buy experiences. And Game Time is the way to do it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Fitzdog for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FITZDOG for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's get to it. My guest today has a new book called Great Falls, Montana, and he is a self-proclaimed weirdo. The book talks about growing up biracial and kind of an oddball in Montana, girls, drugs, kind of coming up with his own identity. The New York Times called him a giddy rush of escapist nonsense. He was on, you probably know him, he was on the Late Late Show with James Corden for the entire run as the band leader and announcer. He was on that show Comedy Bang Bang with Scott Aukerman. He's done it all, and like huge online. He was at the forefront of kind of viral clips, and you should watch some of his TED Talks. Those are great. So we had an amazing time today. Hung out at the Comedy Store, and this is it. Enjoy my chat with the legendary Reggie Watts. All right, here we are in the bowels of the Comedy Store in the studio. I don't know if they have a name for it yet. The Comedy
Cellar?
Outlet Store?
Comedy Outlet Store. Yeah. This, you mean this room?
Yeah.
The podcast room? The Comedy Dungeon.
The Comedy Dungeon.
You know,
Reggie Watts has officially named the podcast studio because they just built it. They needed a name.
They did? Comedy Dungeon, man. Yeah,
the dungeon,
Come to the dungeon, man. Oh, it's in the dungeon. No, not in the upper room. Oh, yeah, I'll be there. So dumb.
So, how are you, weirdo?
I don't fucking know. I'm good. I just woke up. Well, kind of I just woke up. I woke up like an hour and a half ago, but I still feel like I'm waking up. I'm good. Yeah.
Has it been your life? Are you like a sleep till noon guy?
Yeah.
Really?
On average. Well, you know, it's funny. Last night, I went out to dinner with a friend, and she was like, let's stop by at a friend's house. And so it's a bunch of people from the clowning community, you know, from the Elysian Theater. Like,
okay.
Like Chad Damiani.
Yeah.
And, who was there too? A total surprise was John C. Reilly. John C. Reilly was there because he's like kind of clown based. People don't realize that.
One of the great storytellers I've ever met.
Yeah, right. I mean, geez. I mean, he's like kind of like a Mark Twain-ish kind of a guy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like in our current time.
Yep.
So he was there and he told me all kinds of stories, but I happen to have Quaaludes. Because Quaaludes haven't existed since 1983.
Were they left over from the 80s? I was going to say, I haven't seen one since I was in high school.
Someone figured it out. I guess the precursor is really rare in order to create the chemical.
Right.
And somehow this dude figured it out, and I'd never tried it before. And so me and a friend, the woman that I went to dinner with, she was super stoked on it. She's like, I've been dreaming of trying Quaaludes. And I was like, yeah, me too, for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And so we tried them, and I have to say, they're definitely not like anything I've experienced before.
People say it's the greatest drug they've ever taken.
Yeah.
And I missed it. I was afraid of it in the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, I understand. But the messaging about drugs in the 80s was pretty clear.
I did a lot of drugs, but I just didn't do Quaaludes.
Quaaludes.
Yeah.
Right. How about Black Beauties?
Yes, did Black. Well, that's just speed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did a lot of mescaline. I sold mescaline for a minute.
You did mescaline, but you didn't do Quaaludes. That's insane. I would be more afraid to do mescaline than Quaaludes.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I think mescaline to me felt like acid light. It wasn't like taking LSD.
Yeah, right. Yeah, LSD is a huge commitment. Yeah, and microdosing wasn't a thing back then.
No, it was a full dose.
Yeah, people were just like, no, you do the drugs.
Yeah. Have you done LSD?
I have many times, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had kind of like an amazing major trip when I was probably like 20, 23 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was this really pure stuff called Shakti Shiva that was made by the chemist who did most of the Grateful Dead acid, whatever. And it was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was life-altering realizations. I got into math after it. I became a vegetarian. Really? It was insane. I'm not a vegetarian anymore, but I was a vegetarian back then. It like changed. All this shit changed. It was crazy.
What'd you see?
I don't know what it was. It was almost like, it's like the entire, like the seams of reality were just undone. And I was just seeing like the limitlessness of the cosmos or whatever. And then it kind of ignited these interests in a way that I'd never had them ignited before. Like it wasn't like in school, like math was like, I'm afraid of math. I'm terrible at math. I'm not into it. Yeah. Especially I got as far as geometry and then I started falling off. Yeah. And for some reason on this trip, it opened my mind in a way that after I came off it, I was like, I know what to do. Like that type of thing. Like I'm going to only eat these types of things and I'm going to study sacred geometry and I'm going to blah, 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 blah.
Sacred geometry?
Yeah, sacred geometry. Like the old school. It's like I guess the Greeks and the Romans practiced it. It's geometry, but they ascribe meaning to the different shapes and organizations of shapes. Yeah. Right. So like you've heard of maybe the tree of life or the flower of life pattern. Okay. Which is, it looks like a kind of like a hexagon, but it's made out of interlocking circles. Okay. So it's like a bunch of circles interlocking, but the general outline of the shape is kind of
it's like the Da Vinci Code shape.
Kind of, yeah. There's tons of stuff like that, and a lot of like adventure movies about ancient cultures that they do use sacred geometry because that was just a part of their cultures back then for building buildings, like how the pyramids were built and things. They used sacred geometry. Right. So it's like a spiritual form of geometry, but it's still geometry.
I fucking loved geometry when I was in high school. It was the only math I really loved.
You really?
Yeah, man, I don't know why. I had a great teacher, Mr. Amsterdam, and I don't know. It was maybe Jill Garfunkel was in my class, and she used to wear Angora sweaters, low cut, kind of tight. Oh. And it's weird because I think about her still. Yes. And then I think, wait, I'm not supposed to think about her because she was only 15 and I'm 57. I shouldn't be conjuring a 15-year-old.
Yeah, but you were that age back then, so that's legal, right?
I'm grandfathered in.
Yeah, I think that's completely legal. You shouldn't be hard on yourself on that. It's like, you can let that go, man.
Just be those eyes. Be the young eyes.
Those eyes. Ooh, those eyes. Yeah, I mean, 100%. Of course. Yeah. I don't know if I remember like any girls back then specifically enough to have that kind of a vision.
Joanne.
Well, yeah, Joanne for sure. Well, Joanne, I do have pictures of her, so I can go, oh, that's what she looked like. Yeah. That's true. But like none of like the crush, like in classroom crush from afar, like, oh, she's so hot, she'll never go out with me, like that kind of vibes. Yeah. I don't remember those people. I remember their names, but I don't remember what they look like. Because when you look at the pictures in the book, you're like, why was I attracted?
I know. Why was her hair so big?
Yeah, it was
she
so
looks like
huge.
a weirdo.
The hair was so crazy. And we were like, that's the shit. That was cool.
Sometimes I meet those girls now when they're older. And, they're still beautiful, but it kind of ruins it. I don't want to see them now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't know if I've seen... I actually haven't seen that many of so when I go back to Great Falls, I will run into people, but not those main girls. Like I haven't run into Autumn Clark or any of the few other, Kristen Gunderson. I haven't seen her in a long time. I had a crush on her for a long time, but I haven't seen any of those, but I've seen like many other classmates.
Yeah. So speaking of the book.
Yes.
Great Falls, Montana. Yeah. I read it and I fucking loved it. Oh, man. It was such a great journey. It was such a honest, it had a great narrative. I mean, because you have a very interesting story. And, I think the main theme of it is that you live your life in improv, not just in the microcosm, but also in the choices you make about where you're going to live, what you're going to do. Like it all just sort of, I don't know if you believe in attraction as much as I mean, what is your sort of like theory on how everything unfolds that takes you to the next place?
Yeah, I mean, I just say like I have this dumb rule. Well, it's not dumb, but I have this rule. I just call it like follow the fun.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was about finding the good times, like the spaces that felt good, the people that felt good to hang out with, and if I followed that, generally it would lead me to really cool, interesting situations.
Yeah.
And then that would kind of let me know, like, maybe I should, maybe now it's time to do this, you know, and luckily I, you know, could listen to that and could respond to it, you know? So I think that's kind of was it. It's really kind of simple. Like I'm always looking for what's the fun, groovy situation, and I want more of it. Where's it going? Oh, it's like, where's this at? Oh, this is in New York. Okay. Well, I guess I put out some feelers and see if New York's available. And if it is, then I'll go over. And if it's not, you know,
right.
It's crazy. But I never like push too hard. I just kind of put it out there.
Yeah.
And oftentimes someone would be like, hey, do you want to move into our house? We got space. And
yeah.
Like, oh, okay, cool.
Right.
You know, kind of like
that. I mean, my son's 23 and he's a little lost right now. He's in Central America for 5 months, hitchhiking around Guatemala and Mexico. But career-wise has no idea what he wants to do. And I just keep saying to him, you're in your 20s, man. The 20s is about just like, you can't come up with a plan and then execute it because it's not based on anything yet. You don't know what you love. So just open yourself up, but whatever it is, do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just commit to it.
Yep.
And then it'll all add up. That's what I love about the book is that who you are today is an amalgam of all these different periods that you went through, and it all synthesized into something that nobody else had really done.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, it's a trip because, you know, for me, like I said, I just want to be like a part of the adventure, part of, you know, the story of what makes life exciting for myself, but also I want to provide cool experiences for my friends and other people. Yeah. I've always been like that. And so, you know, luckily I've gotten to run into some extraordinary people, and they're like, oh, I know someone who, you know, because they're excited, you know, people are excited to hook people up with other people that they're excited about. And luckily I found the right veins and just kind of listened to it. And not every decision was great, but, you know, all decisions lead to who you are, you know, so even the bad ones, you know, so I appreciate all of the decisions I made. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy sometimes. And also, it's just like the time I couldn't imagine him growing up. Like I grew up exactly at the right time period. You know, I talk about this a lot, but some of my other Gen X friends will be like, yeah, I wouldn't trade. They're all in agreement. They're like, I wouldn't trade growing up in the 90s versus growing up in the 80s for anything.
Yeah,
right. And because that, you know, I went to school and, you know, kids had knives and guns in their car for hunting after school. And no one ever thought that someone would like bring a gun into the school and start shooting it up. It just wasn't in the consciousness. It wasn't a thing. Right. And so, you know, in Montana, at least that was the norm, and we didn't think anything about it. It was like, oh, after school, we go rabbit hunting or something. I'm going to kill some gophers, and, you know, I've got my pocket knife, and that was it. Right. It was very, very, so I don't know. But then I, you know, extrapolate, I mean, going beyond that, moving to the 90s and then moving to Seattle in the 90s.
Seattle in the 90s. I mean, you kind of nailed it.
I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah. Like
I almost went to New York. Yeah, to the day. Yeah, I know. Insane, you know, and then moving to New York, you know, in 2003, exactly when Rafifi was taking off. And so every time period or every city I moved to was pretty much exactly the right time to move there and to explore what it was and to kind of exhaust the potential of it until the next, you know.
Right. But also it seems like you showed up at places where it was like there was a need for creativity, you know, and that you were, there was no gatekeeper. There was sort of just like, hey, we need people. We got this grunge kind of thing blowing up. We need some people to staff it. And then you go to New York in the 90s and all of a sudden it's like, wow, we got all these cool rooms. We need people that are weird. Yep. Yeah. And you just were there.
Yes. Yeah. I know, like everything just kind of happened. It blossomed at all the similar times. Like me getting into weird comedy was what the guys in the state were already doing or what Mr. Show was onto already. And in me seeing those things just reinforced my desire to want to be involved in making comedy like that. And yeah,
Comedy Central was pretty amazing back then. They had Exit 57.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
With Amy Sedaris.
Yeah, that's right. Wow.
They had all these cool little shows, and they gave them room to play, and they kind of said, here's the keys, lock up when you're done. We'll let you know if you get another season, and let people do whatever they wanted.
Totally.
So you were sort of part of that. You had some play on Comedy Central a little after that, right?
I mean, when I first moved to New York in 2003, it took a few years, but yeah, like there were brushes with Comedy Central, but I think if anything, it was Super Deluxe. That was the first kind of place that allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do and have it live online.
Right.
Because they were trying to, capture the viral video phenomenon. So they were a
little ahead of their time.
They were ahead of their time, and they were giving money away though. I mean, they had like really nice budgets. And so, and I made some pretty dumb stuff, and I don't know what happened to it. It's not online anymore.
No, they buried it all. I hosted the Porn Awards one year in Las Vegas.
Oh my God.
7,000 porn stars, and I'm up there hosting it, and they're like, all right, here's the deal. You're going to have about 30 seconds to get their attention. Because picture 7,000 porn stars, with cameras on the crowd, all flashing. Okay, you got 30 seconds to get them. And if you don't, we'll probably have to pull you off stage because they'll just start talking and it'll be over. And so I had a really good opening joke, and I got them. And then Super Deluxe gave me all this money to shoot videos. So I shot all these sketches where like Ron Jeremy is the TV repair guy who comes over, and we shot like 10 videos, and they gave me like a ton of money. But then Super Deluxe got bought by the Cartoon Network.
Oh, that's right.
And that's why everything got buried, because anything that was edgy, they didn't want associated with the Cartoon Networks. They just flushed it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that they vaulted it or something, because
that would be nice.
I mean, I made this dumb thing called zip code, and I don't know what happened. Like it wasn't great. But
what was the idea?
The idea was it was a series that was based on, I would do like kind of a travel log, like a history and travel log of each zip code in New York.
That's great.
Like New York City or whatever, the different boroughs and stuff like that. And so I did like Williamsburg was the first one, whatever that zip code was. And it was all just fake shit, like we shot a thing outside of Arlene's Grocery, and it was, I'm trying to remember. He was a friend of the State, and he was on Wet Hot American Summer. I forget his name, but it was Zach something.
Not Galifianakis.
No, not Galifianakis. It was kind of a bigger dude, kind of
sounds familiar.
Long, kind of bobbed, straight brown hair. But
not Michael Portnoy.
No.
Okay.
No, I'll remember his name at some point. But he was like this dope actor, and he's like acted in a bunch of things since then. But he's like just a straight actor.
Yeah.
But I had him outside with his arm around this girl who was like chewing gum all the time, and like he was talking about the history of Arlene's Grocery, which was just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
And he's chewing his gum, and every time the camera turns back, it's a different girl chewing gum, but wearing the same outfit. And just every time we just like cut back, it'd be a different girl.
Always doing
and then it comes back to the first girl at the end of the last shot or whatever. And really casual, no big deal. And then we had Jenny Slate was a Latina, which I'm sure wouldn't fly today. But like she had like big hoop earrings, and she was talking about some bar where she had all these experiences. And then I talked to her, and then we did this retro thing about this guy named something McCaffer Murphy, and it was like all done in sepia tone, and it's him working hard at night working on these designs. He's drawing robots.
Yeah.
And but like, I can't remember what it was. Anyways, it was just like, it was a hodgepodge of just the craziest, dumbest stoner ideas that me and my friend at the time, Tommy Smith, who's this brilliant writer, we just put it together, and we shot it like with really low budge cameras and stuff like that. But we got a budget, and we got to, make rent and
that's
pay
amazing.
For food.
Wow.
That was dope.
Yeah, that's I love the zip codes in New York. I was once in 10001.
Whoa.
Which is Little Italy.
Oh.
Must have been like one of the first places they gave out zip codes, I guess.
Yeah, 10001.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I love the symmetry. It's really great.
Yeah, I know.
I've never lived in a symmetrical zip code.
I also lived at an address that was 2000, and I was there in the year 2000.
Oh, that's
That was my
great.
street address in Venice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Venice?
Yeah.
Okay. So you lived in LA in the thousands?
I was in New York doing comedy in the 90s, all through the 90s. And then I moved out here in like 2000, but I was going back and forth to New York like every few months because I was on the Howard Stern show. So I would go in there every 2 months and do a spot. Yeah, like 2 months.
Sick.
And then I'd run around and do all those crazy rooms. So like,
of course.
So like Bobby Tisdale is a good buddy of mine. We play golf a lot together. Yeah.
He's the best, man.
Yeah, you mentioned him in the book.
He's so awesome.
Yeah.
He's good. Chris, crazy.
Yeah.
A crazy man.
Yep.
Brilliant, big-hearted, crazy man. And totally like identifies with roosters in the most unique way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He had like this thing with roosters, and it kind of made sense. Like there was some show he did, or this web show he was working on, and it featured a rooster in it. And anyways, I don't know. Him and Jenny Slate at one point when they were married, and they named their dog after me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Reggie Watts was the name of their dog.
That's hilarious.
And I would go over to their place, and I don't know, it was just like, what a strange time. But but New York, like, yeah, Bobby Tisdale, man.
And Bobby grew up in the same town as Zach Galifianakis.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
I love it. I mean, I didn't know
a little ass town in North Carolina.
It's that is pretty crazy. Yeah, because Bobby, like, I see him. Well, he does voices on Bob's Burgers, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, that was such a wild time back then. I just felt so lucky to be there at that time. It was.
Well, you talk about it in the book, and what's kind of crazy is you didn't go to New York to go on Rafifi. You just kind of went because Eugene Merman was hosting a show there, right?
Yeah, that was Invite Them Up. Yeah.
Yeah. So you showed up to New York because you had sort of like a 1 month contract with a band to record with them or whatever, and then you just kind of showed up and you just kind of went on and you just kind of destroyed, and then it wasn't. That was it. You were in.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
I mean, people spend years trying to just get seen. And you just the universe just opened up and you walked in.
I mean, yeah, I got really lucky. I think it was just because we were all like-minded, you know?
Yeah.
Like I think like, it's like water droplets getting too close together. It's like, it's just like, that's what it felt like when I walked in there. I was like nervous, but it also reminded me of high school when I was performing in competitive drama, humorous solo, what I was competing in, and I was, in front of these people that were like just staring at you, going like, "Okay, you have to do something now," and I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna do this stuff. I don't know if you're gonna like it, but I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff." Yeah. But then people were like, "Oh, I like that," and it had that similar feeling where I went up because what I was doing, no one else was doing, and so I always had a little bit of worry that I'm not doing stand up, but that whole room was about weirdo comedy anyways. Right. So you had like, Dimitri Martin with easels and, and PowerPoint and multimedia, multimedia comedy art, comedy stuff. And then there were performance artists that would perform in there.
Michael Portnoy used to do crazy shit.
Portnoy. What was the thing he did? It was all sound effects. It was Czar or Zav or Czar or something like that. And he wrote all the music on synthesizers, and it was just like synthesizer sound. So it was just like, and he would pretend like he was manning a spaceship, but it was all miming. And he had like this skin tight suit and this crazy like evil guy looking beard, like Ming the Merciless kind of vibe or whatever. And he was just like, just for like 4 minutes, and people were like just staring at it. And I was like, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, he went on Luna Lounge one night and he pulled his dick out and he stuffed it into a bottle of Prozac. And then he threw the Prozac at the audience.
Oh, shit. Oh, my God. That's great.
And then remember he did the famous thing on Bob Dylan was playing at the Grammys.
Soy Bomb.
And he came out on stage. He somehow got hired as a backup dancer. Like he was legitimately, had the laminate, was in the show.
Yeah.
And then unbeknownst to them, he rips his shirt off halfway through the song and it says Soy Bomb. And then he snuggles up to Bob Dylan. Like,
yeah, that's right. And Bob doesn't react at all.
Not at all.
He barely reacts.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
That was the coolest. I mean, Bob's probably like, I've seen it all.
Yeah.
I lived through the 60s and psychedelics
right.
and people jumping on stage. It was like, this
I
is
got
nothing.
food at the Royal Albert Hall. Yeah. I can handle this.
Yeah. I mean, that was like very experienced showmanship with it. But yeah, no, it was insane. And then he gets tackled by the security.
Yes. And nobody knew if it wasn't a bit. The audience just thought, oh, this is a weird concept that Bob Dylan came up with.
That was insane. Michael was insane. And I went on to work with him. Like, he invited me to several art things. Like, we did a thing in Bolzano, Italy, where they opened up an art wing. Like an art wing to the university that's up there. And so they invited him to curate a bunch of artists to occupy the rooms and do different pieces inside of it. So I did that.
You flew out to Italy for that?
Yeah. We got flown out to Italy for that. He invited me to another thing. I can't remember where that was. It was another country. Went to another country. Yeah. He had like some workshops. So I worked with him and his wife Yeva for a while, but that was the interesting thing about New York and that time period of Invite Them Up. You had Invite Them Up, and then you had like this crew of performance artists called the Art Stars, and they were performing at the Bowery Poetry Club, I think.
Okay.
And they would have these, again, it was like very similar. You had Invite Them Up with a bunch of weirdo comedians. Then you had whatever the name of that art star night was at the Bowery Poetry Club. And it was similar. It was a lineup, but it was performance artists. Yeah. And so you'd have crossover cirque artists. You'd have, I don't know, just straight up performance artists or conceptual people. And they would do these things and they were insane. I mean, like some of the stuff was insane. Like a woman with like a rotary saw, like putting it on her crotch with like all this blood flying everywhere. It was all fake, but like this blood flying everywhere, and everyone's just like, "Oh my god," you know. And it was just, it was chaos. It was total chaos. Amazing. But you had like this. So sometimes I would perform there, and then I would also perform on Invite Them Up. Yeah. And so it was such a weird existence at that time in New York, because you had like very New York-y things going on, like weirdo, dangerous feeling performance.
Well, the Lower East Side was sort of finding itself at that point because it had always been artistic. There'd always been a lot of like grungy, artistic people. But in the 90s, it sort of became a place that was attracting audiences that, like you talk in your book about wanting to break the rules, but also wanting to appeal to the mainstream. Yeah. And the Lower East Side was sort of finding that footing a little bit at that time.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, things kind of opened up a little bit, like Invite Them Up and The State and Wet Hot
Luna
American Summer
Lounge.
And, Luna Lounge. Yeah. All of those people doing what they were doing found a way in, because the internet also, it was like the perfect storm, right? It was like a bunch of weirdos that were doing strange but ridiculous, absurd shit, and then the internet, which is absurd in its very nature, and so everyone's experimenting. Back then there wasn't a YouTube yet, but there were places to put videos, and it was just a bunch of weirdos kind of dominating taking advantage of the internet. And so that kind of became a little bit more mainstream. Yeah. And then it just slowly started building. So now, you had Zach Galifianakis getting a major special, and you had
UCB getting a show.
Yeah. And then David Cross kind of being an early pioneer, being on Sub Pop Records. He was like, oh, what? He's on a music label?
Right.
But he's a comedy guy, but he's also performing in rock clubs. He's opening for Afghan Wigs or whatever, like there was that crossover of like really hip underground music mixed with comedians. Yeah. It was all happening at the same time. It was insane. Yeah. And that's something in the book. Like I don't go into it in great detail because most of it obviously centers around Great Falls, hence the name. But I definitely,
you're saving it for the next book.
I do want to my idea is like I want to write about Seattle, and then I want to write it about New York, and then maybe LA. But because I really want to get in there, because I don't think people realize, I say this a lot, but I like to promote it, but what happened in the 90s in Seattle, and then what happened in New York in the early 2000s or the aughts. The aughts, where neo-hipsterism kind of like rose from the chaos of kind of performance art, outsider comedy, were very, very important movements in American entertainment, and especially the New York part. it hasn't been, there's no documentary on it. There's no one is talking about it. It's like very, very important because everybody that you see in movies and TV shows today are related to Invite Them Up. Like
Michael Showalter is one of the biggest directors in Hollywood right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And then Michael Ian Black doing all his crazy stuff that he's still doing.
Yeah.
And David Wayne directing.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of
David
Wayne.
Yeah, Michael Showalter has directed a little bit, but I don't know what Michael Showalter is doing as much, but David Wayne's destroying it. And then you've got The State. They just got back together, and they've had such an impact and influence. But then you get all the TV shows and movies you see, like, whatever, Jenny Slate or Aziz Ansari or Kumail Nanjiani or Chelsea Peretti, or Key and Peele, which are mildly related.
Right.
They're all dominant characters in the modern landscape.
Yeah. So I want to get into the book. There's so much I want to talk about. Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I think that comes through the book is that you have this kind of Zen. You talk about observing yourself almost as an outsider, which is a lot of the way meditation is taught is like be a fly on the wall, just observe, your feelings, observe your thoughts, and you don't necessarily participate in them emotionally as much.
Right.
So, I mean, would you say that was a good thing or a bad thing? Because there was times where I felt like you thought it was keeping you from engaging emotionally with people, and there were other times where it felt like it was a positive thing in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think the probably the space where it was less helpful was in romantic relationships, because that being kind of observational and that kept it more in a fantasy zone in a way. Like I was kind of projecting the fantasy of what I thought a relationship should be. So I was observing the fantasy of it as opposed to becoming more open and vulnerable to another human being.
You were staging it.
I was staging it. Yeah. Like I was living the fantasy of the idea of a relationship.
Right.
So I think that it wasn't as helpful there. I think it's incredibly helpful in art for sure in what I was doing, because I'm observing what I'm doing in real time, especially as an improviser. That is all you're doing. You're listening and observing and responding. Right. And so in that case, it worked really, really well. But in total in life, I was always looking. That's why when I was talking about earlier about finding the fun, I was always looking for the good time, the good vibes. And that's part of the observation. I'm like, oh, that's great. Oh, I bet you this would be cool. Oh yeah, this is happening. Yeah, let's just do it. Yeah. And I'm kind of, I'm active in it, but I'm also observing it because I like the feeling of feeling like I'm living in a movie in a way. And that's good, but also not great when it comes to people going like, I'm right here and I have emotions and I want to talk about stuff.
Yeah. Do you find being in that state creates energy for you or saps energy from you? Being not available?
Yeah. No, I think it creates energy. It definitely gives me, what do you call it? What would you call it? It gives me, it's a form of it. It's a form of energy. What was it?
Like flow?
Yeah, it's because like I'm listening, but I'm getting rewarded by, I'm kind of like slightly projecting expectations and oftentimes I'm getting rewarded like it's accurate. Yeah. So it's this engine of like I'm projecting with the I'm projecting an expectation, then I'm getting back something that's pretty close to what I was expecting, and it's almost like a beam of like a real-time manifestation beam or something like that. And I mean, similar to if that sounds like an alien concept, it's a similar thing to having a natural conversation with somebody. Right. You're both like, I'm projecting this thing that I think that you'll like, that, we'll do this. And then someone's responding like, yeah. And they're, so it's this constant back and forth, but it just starts levitating because you create this nice flow.
Right.
So yeah.
It's funny. My daughter's, she babysits these two little kids and they're 5 and 3. And so she came home last night and I go, how was it? Did you guys have some fun? And she said for 2 hours, the 5-year-old sat at a fake cash register at the table and kept asking the little boy what he wanted from the store. And then she would punch it up and tell him what it was. And she goes, it was like a 2-hour improvisational exercise. She said they were completely connected to each other. And you think that about kids, like life is just an improv.
Yes.
If you really watch them, everything is they accept.
Yeah.
And they go with it.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's true. And also that never stops. Like I think we get older and we're like, I'm an adult now. And now I know how things are. So, now I don't do that anymore or whatever, but everyone's constantly improvising.
Yeah. Right.
Like that's all we're ever doing. And I remember having that thought, I think maybe it was on mushrooms or something like that. I was like looking at street lights and sidewalks and mailboxes. And I was like, all of this stuff was improvised. Like, so I was like, I'm going to design. It's like, what do you think? It's like, I think that works.
Yeah.
Why don't we add this? Okay, that looks good. Okay, well, let's just put it up.
Yeah.
Like, you want to standardize it? Sure, we'll standardize it.
Right.
But everything's made up. Like all the stuff, this table, the glass, everything around us that's man-made.
Money.
It's money, yeah.
Money's a crazy one to think about the improv that went into creating paper currency.
I mean, yeah. I mean, people just wanting to, figure out a civilized way to control resources.
To not have to bring a donkey to the market to get some oranges.
Yeah, totally. Someone else can do that. I'll pay for the service.
Right, yeah.
Totally, yeah. But it's important to remember that, though, because I think people feel locked into life and they think like, oh, this is it. This is how it works. I guess this will be it until I die, basically.
Yeah.
And I'll have some fun time, but like every day you can do incredible things.
Yeah.
And so I try to live my life in that way, but that's an improvisational mindset.
I like it. So your grandfather, I want to ask about your grandfather's death. You explain it in 2 sentences and it could easily have been a chapter. So this was your mother's father, your father's father.
Father's father, yeah.
And this is in Cleveland, and he was a polygamist. Or a philanderer.
Yeah, he was a philanderer. Yeah, I wouldn't say a polygamist. I don't think it was official. It was unofficially official. He was a gangster, I guess. He ran the numbers.
No kidding.
Yeah. So he was involved in that. He was having an affair with a couple women, aside from my grandma. And apparently he was with a woman at a spot, hotel or some motel or something, or someone's house. And they were together. And then another woman that he was seeing, that he was cheating with, knew he was there, found him there. And both of them got so angry that they stabbed him to death.
Together.
I think so. Yeah. That's the story I heard.
Wow.
Yeah. So he died from women.
But your father, I don't think was a philanderer, was he?
He was kind of a philanderer.
Not flagrant.
No, not bad. He just was dating a lot of women.
Okay.
And when he met my mom, she knew that he was doing that. And, after a while was like, you got to knock this off.
Yeah.
And then he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he had some of it,
Right.
And I definitely have some of that too in me, but I don't do it underhandedly. It's like each generation got slightly better. It's like his father was like, I'm not telling anybody, I'm just doing hardcore cheating. Then my dad was like, I'm just going to date a lot of women. We'll see. I'll go as long as I can until I can't anymore. And then now I'm like, well, I'm dating a few people, but they all know that I'm dating other people.
Right.
So I feel a little bit more responsible, and everything's above board. So
you said you're a serial monogamist, but I guess with a little flair.
I was a serial monogamist for sure in my 20s.
Right.
But after 27, after my last breakup, kind of monogamous breakup, in my 20s, I hadn't dated anybody else really. Like I just would meet this one person, and then we would be together, and then the steam would run out, and then I would, be by myself for a little while, and then I would find another person. And then at 27, I just thought to myself, you know what, screw this. I'm just going to date a lot of people. And I would just be dating like 7 people at once, but they never knew about, I wasn't forthcoming about it. I didn't lie. I just was vague.
Yeah. Well, look, if you're in a band that's doing as well as yours was at that age, I think it's pretty acknowledged.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. It's too bad it's a stereotype, but it's a little bit of a stereotype. Yeah, for sure. But it also it was exciting. It was super exciting. It was exciting to when I go to New York, there's this lady there. She's really awesome. And when I go to whatever, LA, there's this really awesome, and that was a wonderful feeling. But it would have been different if I would have had the mindset now,
And was it at this point you kind of decided you didn't want to have kids?
Yeah.
Or was that later?
I think even when I was a teenager, I didn't want to have kids. I kind of, I was never really interested in it. I think it's basically because I don't know. I just always envisioned myself as kind of an explorer, and I didn't want to have connections to things that would stop me from I better not do that because I have to do this. And so, and even with pets, I have never owned a pet in my adult life.
Damn, you're taking this to an extreme.
Yeah.
No plants.
No, I do have plants, so I have someone who takes care of them. Yeah, I'm terrible. Because I care about people and things too much.
Yeah.
So if I had a pet, I would just be like, oh my God, how's my pet? My pet is my pet, and it would never be a dog. So I don't, and even a fish I'd feel guilty. I'm leaving a fish, the fish, it needs some, so I'd just rather not and just go over to people's houses and go there's that cool cat. Oh, there's that weird dog, or my mom, when my mom was alive, she had her crazy dog and I would play around with that dog.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I loved it, but I liked being able to walk away.
Yeah. Well, my condolences about your mom. She died this year? Was it a year ago?
A year ago, November 1st.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've always followed you on Instagram, and you always had beautiful pictures of you guys together. And I always felt like that was a very special relationship. Actually, I marked a passage I wanted to read of you describing your mom. This woman wasn't simply my mother or even my best friend. She was my protector, my guardian. She had defended me all my life against racists and bullies. She had protected me from the anger of my father, made the ultimate sacrifice by telling the man she loved he needed to move away until I had left home myself. She'd nurtured my creativity. She'd tolerated my rebelliousness with a good-natured wink. Whenever I'd gone back to Great Falls, she had always been there, waiting for me, welcoming me, loving me. More than any single person or place, my mother was my home. She was my base, my roots, my power. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I mean, I got real lucky with that one.
Yeah.
Got real lucky.
And it sounds like she had kind of a tough childhood in France. She was working.
Yeah. Yeah, she hated her mother. Her mother was a pretty terrible person.
Yeah.
And cheated on her father when he was away at war, and had kids and stuff. And when he came back, he was like, what the fuck?
Right.
Or had she'd had one kid, or had one kid with this other guy when he came back. And and just had to do a lot on her own. Was her father's, she was definitely a daddy's girl or whatever, but he was away at war. And then when he came back, he was working as a taxi driver, and, but they had a farm in the early days, she was on the farm with her father. Then the war happened, and then he had to go away. So it was then she was left with her mother, and her mother was terrible to her brother. Her brother never allowed her brother Andre to go to school and learn how to read and write and things like that. She kind of kept him stupid on purpose. So
really?
He would do more labor.
No
things like
kidding.
That. Yeah. Not a very good lady at all. And so my mom always hated her, and, but had good relationship with her aunt, Nanette, who was also in the war. But when she came back, she was a war hero. And
what did she do in the war?
She was in prison. She was in a German prison. I don't know if it was I think it was a concentration camp. She was in a concentration camp. I never understood if she was Jewish or not. But I did 23andMe, and I have 10% Ashkenazi.
Oh, well, there
Jewish,
you go.
And so I'm sure there was something there, but my mom never made it clear. It was really weird. But yeah, so she was there and she survived. She was like a human skeleton and everything. And she made it out, and helped lead a small resistance towards the very end of the war, where things were fading, but she kind of helped with that, and got France's Purple Heart version of a Purple Heart, and and was highly decorated.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so she was really good friends with her, and and her aunt was like a protector for her, and she loved her father. It was just like, yeah, the war, being on her own, having to try to protect her brother as much as she could. You know, she's just always a fighter, just fighting all the time for
classic redhead
and French. Yeah,
and French.
Yeah, redhead and
French redhead. Watch out.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah, she's sick.
And then you talk about it in that passage, is that your father was kicked out because he was abusive to you and your mom wouldn't have it. But then he comes back right before you leave. He comes back as a result of you knowing that you're going to leave. He's allowed back in the house.
Yes.
And you describe it as being you were happy for them, which is kind of a big emotional accomplishment for you.
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't really think of it that way, just because I was glad that my mom had my dad back, you know, because she loved him, and I knew that she did. And I didn't think of him as a bad guy necessarily. We, you know, before he left, what led up to him leaving definitely got intense. It wasn't like being punched or anything like that. It was just the potential of it getting worse. You got
the belt though, right?
The belt was a thing, but then sometimes I dealt with it in a kind of a comedic way.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't like, oh man, you know, like, oh, my father, I'm going to, you know, it was never quite there. Cause I had that observational way of being in life. And so for me, I kind of tried to twist it into something funny. I tried to make a bit out of it during the moment, you know. It wasn't always like that, but like for the most part, I tried in some way. So it doesn't feel as traumatic in my mind. I'm not like, oh, my dad, and, you know, it was more like my dad tried, but it didn't quite work. Yeah. And he was getting more frustrated, and I started getting a little bit more in his face about stuff. And so I think my mom was like, I think this could get worse. This could turn into something worse. Right. And so I'm going to preempt this. And thankfully she did. But then when I would go visit him in Cleveland, when he was living in Cleveland with his mother and kind of taking care of his mother, and the grandfather was there. I mean, you know, it was weird, but it was, you know, we went out to movies, and, you know, took me out to stuff, and we'd go fishing and stuff like that. So, you know, I got to do some dad stuff, but I was glad that he was out there. And then when it came time for me to move to Seattle, I was stoked because, I knew that she loved him, and that, you know, and that he wanted to come back. Yeah. And now they were together again. And I was like, that's sick. That's good. Right. I'm glad.
So, all right, so let's talk about Seattle a little bit, because that's an amazing time. You were in this band Micron 7. And I was kind of like curious about that time when you guys would have these late night jam sessions at different places. I guess the 700 Club was one of them. And that people, Erykah Badu would come by, and I forget who else you said.
Chuck Treese, drummer from Philadelphia. Did like a bunch of stuff with like the Roots, or you know, that scene where the Roots were from. And
D'Angelo,
D'Angelo. Yeah, we did. D'Angelo never sat in, but like we'd have musicians that played with him that would sit in, like a horn player. All kinds of people would come through, and they would just like come in for that jam session. It was awesome. Those times were insane.
Right. And so that band, you felt like when it first formed, it sounded like there was some pretty complex music you guys were making.
I mean, we were all Cornish students, you know, taking music, so learning jazz. So there was a lot of pretty educated musicians on board, and the drummer Zeke Keeble was a crazy, monstrous drummer. He was insane. And I've never played with any drummer that's plays like that guy. He had his own thing. It was insane. And everybody in Kevin Hudson, amazing bass player, just a really solid bass player. He was great. Everyone knew Jazz Chop. So the stuff that we were doing kind of was a mixture of jazz and our love of modern electronic and rock music that was going on at the time. Right.
And you were in a lot of bands. You were in a disco band. That must have been a riot. It was like an 8-piece band?
I think it was like 8 or 9, Yeah, it was huge, 4 lead singers.
And just blowing out the place, people dancing, high energy.
Man, it was insane. It was crazy because it started. George, the guy who started the whole thing, it was his idea. He basically took people from the band Molasses. So it was almost all of Molasses. It was the bass player from Molasses, Harry Worth, who is a sick bass player. Harry Worth and the keyboard player, Keith, and I think maybe some of the horn players, and then there was George on drums, and then myself on vocals, and one of the singers from Molasses, the lead singer from Molasses, was on there, and then this woman who went to Cornish with me was also there, and then this woman, I forget her name. We had a kind of a fourth rotating singer for different reasons. But it was this huge band, and we started playing disco covers, learning them. And
Casey and the Sunshine Band.
All of it. Every disco hit, I've played everything. Almost everything. Isley Brothers, Earth, Wind and Fire, all of it. Donna Summers. And we learned it, and different singers would take different ones. I wanted to do Sarah's Smile, and so I got to do Sarah's Smile. I love that song. Hall & Oates, and so.
Sarah's Smile.
Yes, yeah. And it was just, what an incredible thing to experience this, insanely beautiful music that makes people dance. And we started playing at this, the Phoenix Underground in its old location. And the guy, Rick, who owned it, who was like a total goth dude, and his like really hot girlfriend who was with jet black, long Elvira hair, and like tight leather. And he would have a white boa, a snake around his neck. And he would dance with her like really slow, to like goth music, like Sisters of Mercy and stuff like that. But then we came into his club and we did disco stuff, and it ignited. It was huge. We were making so much money every night. It'd be like, here's $300 in cash. Whoa. And we're playing tomorrow night too. So, oh wow. So I just made $600. That was the most money I'd ever made in my life.
Right.
And it just blew up, and it got bigger and bigger. We started playing, graduations and colleges, and universities. It was awesome. It was cool. And then you got to wear the outfits, and
Well, it's an interesting interlude, and it kind of feeds into like you just accepting what life is offering up. Yeah. Because here you are going to this, artistic music school where you're learning, you're learning to break the rules. And then disco comes along, which is seen at the time as this, death to disco, and this is lame music. But at its heart, it's just funk, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funk. I mean, Hit Explosion was obviously, it was a mixture of music. So it wasn't just necessarily disco, but it was funk. It was like funk and disco, for sure. Yeah. And at the time, I mean, remember the 70s were having Dazed and Confused was popular. Yeah. There was this resurgence of the 70s in the 90s.
Right.
And then even, I remember trip hop, when trip hop came on the scene, and you had like the brand new heavies, like that stuff was straight, like late 70s groove funk stuff. And you had like Delight.
Yeah, I was just going to say Delight,
which is another like throwback. And then you had Bootsy Collins in the band, Bootsy Collins Rubber Band, and Bootsy Collins, and all these like weirdo like crossover jazz fusion dudes, So the 70s were making a resurgence in the 90s. So when we hit with that, it was exactly the right timing.
That's amazing.
It was insane. Yeah. Yeah. And then I also played in an Afro pop group called Smenote, and I played soukous music. I was the keyboard player, and so it was just like it was.
Were they African?
Oh yeah, the two dudes. I forget the name, but they were djembe players, and one of the dudes was like a master djembe player. He was insane.
What's a djembe?
Djembe is a large skin drum that has like a kind of a hourglass shape to it. They're pretty big, and they hang off of straps, and they just play them. Sometimes they'll be on stands as well, but usually worn. And then these guys would add these like little pieces of sheet metal that would kind of like look like flower petals coming off the sides of it. And they had all these like little pierced rings. So they would play it, and then they would just kind of make their hands hit it while they're
Yeah.
while they're playing. So you get this shh,
Right.
and they're doing these like, it's insane. These guys were crazy. So
Wow.
it was cool to play in that band. And
that sound, just you doing it now, sounds like it affected what you do today.
oh, for sure. I mean, I was lucky. I got to play in like, in the 90s in Seattle. I played in like probably 20 bands. I played in like a black heavy metal band, punk band. I played in a straight up kind of like heavy metal kind of Joe Satriani, whatever kind of stuff. I played in an avant-garde jazz band, Wayne Horvitz 4+1 ensemble, which was very compositional, abstract music. I did a ton of performance art, weirdo music stuff for contemporary dancers and choreographers. And I did the Hit Explosion. I did Micron 7. I did, I was in classical pieces. I made a night where I made an improvised drum and bass band. I had another night that was improvised classical music.
Wow.
Where I sang operatically, and I had like these string players, just like, because I was like, classical music is kind of like the blues a little bit. It has similar chord cycles. And so I just had like these sick players like Brent Arnold on cello and Avon Kang on viola. And they were already improvisers, but they came from the classical world. So we would improvise classical music, and I would sing classically over it at the Hammer Museum.
Was it words, or you were just tones?
It was just like me making like fake Italian. It was.
Do you have tapes of that?
No, I don't. Well, I don't. Maybe I don't know.
I gotta say, if you get the book, one of the cool things is you've got these. What do you call these?
QR codes.
He's got QR codes that lead to YouTube videos, and we talked about that first night you did Rafifi. It's on here, and it really is pretty magic that you captured that moment. That was a turning point moment in your life, and you have a pretty good quality audio.
I got lucky on that. Yeah, because I was terrible at preserving anything in the 90s. People were like, "Hey, do you have stuff from the 90s?" I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I do.
Super Deluxe has it all.
Super Deluxe.
Yeah, and so and the other cool things on there is you have like an early garage band that you play. There's a cut from that, and you play. What's fun is you can hear you guys talking before you start playing. Yes. And it really feels garagey. Like, these guys are just figuring out how do you plug an amp in. It just seemed really fun.
4-track, man. Yeah. Just 4-track shit. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, my friend Mike gave, I think he had the recording, and so he thankfully gave it to us to use for the book. But I mean, anything, because I always like hearing myself. What was my voice like? So I actually have a recording of my voice as a 17-year-old. Yeah. Which is very rare. I mean, these days it's a dime a dozen, right? Like every kid growing up now will have thousands of hours of them recorded in some way. And meanwhile, like me, I have like 1 or 2 recordings when I was like 16, maybe. Right. Maybe I might, if I look up in the attic, maybe I might find an old cassette tape where I was messing around with recording my voice someday. But that's it.
Right. Right. Do you have a studio now in your house?
Not really. I have a loop station set up. So if I have song ideas, I can quickly make loops and then save them. So that's about as close as it gets. But I did try to have a studio for a while, and I just never used it because, again, I'm an improviser, so it's hard for me to go like, I'm going to write music today. Like I don't really write like that anymore. I have to write under pressure.
That's the key, because then you're not wasting your whole life.
Totally.
It cuts out all the homework.
Totally. I always tell people that they're like, like sometimes before like a big show or something, like I'll be at like some place where, I don't know, like I did a guest spot with like Mark Rebier and Flying Lotus, at Brooklyn Steel or something like that. And I'm just like talking to my friends, like on the side of the stage and going like, it's like, life, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah. And then someone's like, dude, you're on stage now. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, all right. I'll talk to you about, hold on a second. And then I go on stage and I just rock to 5,000-6,000 people and then just get off stage and go, so anyway, so what I was talking about. It's like, I love that feeling. It's not like I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it in a way that I'm like, whatever. It's more like, I like the feeling of instantaneously being in another incredible reality and then shifting instantaneously into another reality from that. I get off on that.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as Corden goes, you were there for what, 7 or 8 years?
8.5.
8.5 years. And did you archive all of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, all of it's there. The recordings, I mean, obviously every show's recorded, every show, and it's syndicated now. So those all exist.
But do you have it sort of like amassed on one hard drive or anywhere? Or you just sort of know you can find it?
No, I just know I could find it. I mean, if I really wanted to get in there, I could probably contact CBS and see if we could get like some of the tapes. Although my first officer, Tim Young, we would do these things called podcasts, and we would just record because we'd have all the audio going through into the iPad. We would record us basically BSing throughout the entire show. But we would especially record when bands would play on stage, like a guest would be on. And because I would say, like, I've said this before, but like about 90% of the bands were just like, okay.
Yeah.
We're like, okay. Or what could be called like corporate music.
Yeah.
And, you know, not to say that the artists didn't believe in what they were doing, all that stuff, but it just wasn't that great.
Right.
And so we would be commenting like live. It would be like live over commenting while they were playing. And, it was, you know, I never felt bad about it because we were just like, oh, we're just allowing ourselves to do this.
Yeah.
It's like, we're just going to do this and we don't really mean any harm. You know, we're just kind of, oh, we can use that chord progression. Okay. So we're using that chord progression. Oh, okay. There's that soft injured vocal style again. Okay. Oh, I see that's popular. Oh shit. Oh, drums aren't really there. Oh, someone's pressing play on a laptop behind the stage. Oh, I see. They're not really playing that. Okay. Whatever. And everyone just chiming in and it's great. We have hours and hours and hours of this.
And you're backstage doing this.
No, we're on the bandstand.
You're on the band.
Yeah, this is during the show. Yeah. So we're just like quiet. We calmly, like we're up on the microphone, just kind of commenting like this. And, you know, they're on stage. It's like, oh, he's wearing that jacket. I don't know if that jacket's going to get in the way. It's like, oh, well, a nice try. Almost a little pitchy. You know, but it was crazy. But also, to be fair, when there were incredible bands like Paramore or, I don't know, people could seriously perform and sing and had something, there was no podcast. Like we just listened because it was amazing.
Did you support any of them?
Support?
Like, would you play keyboards or anything with the band?
No, that was one of my rules when I joined. When I agreed to the late night, I said we wouldn't be a cover band we wouldn't sub because I just thought it always looked bad whenever I saw David Letterman, like, you know, Paul Schaefer, like saying, yeah, man, you know, like they're like in their suits or whatever. And it's like some hip young artist and they're behind playing the thing. They're amazing musicians, Nick, 100%. They're incredible musicians, but it just looks weird. It's like these older dudes with like this young singer on there. And they're like jamming, but they kind of look cheesy because they're in suits. And I was like, I don't want that. It's like, if they want to bring a band, like, don't be lazy.
Right.
Like spend some money, bring a band.
So if the band, if you had to rank the late night bands, I'm going to read you the ones that I wrote down.
Oh my gosh.
You tell me the order they go in.
Okay.
Fred Armisen and the 8G Band on Seth Meyers.
I didn't hear them enough to know, but I would say they're probably solid up there.
The Roots.
Oh yeah, they're solid. Again, like top 3 or 4 for sure.
John Batiste on the Colbert Show.
An amazing band. Yeah, top 5 for sure.
Letterman's band, Paul Schaefer, Anton Fig.
An amazing band, but it was also kind of, they were like a mid, like, you know, in the talk show history, they were like kind of middle, I guess. They were amazing musicians, but they were kind of like studio musicians.
Right.
And they, you know, played covers and things, and they had a good time. It was good. It was like a studio musician jam-a-thon, and it was dope. But as for like my tastes of what I would consider like, oh, that's interesting, you know, like I would be like, they're solid as fuck, but I don't know. I think they did a good job.
And you did, I don't know if you remember, my best friend was the head writer over there, Mike Gibbons. Do you remember Mike Gibbons?
Oh, I do. Yes, totally.
Yeah. So He told me that once in a while they would have the balls to give him a note to bring to you, like, can you ask Reggie if he'll do something like this? And then they'd come back and they'd be like, did you tell Reggie? And he'd be like, yeah. Is he going to do it? No.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I wasn't trying to be difficult. It's just, but also it was to be expected. I told them, they knew, and then oftentimes the showrunner, Ben Winston, would like be in the ear in comms or whatever. He'd be like, Reg, I know you're not into doing these types of things usually, but we just thought it'd be funny because of the crossover. I mean, and if he explained it, and I was like, that sounds cool. Okay, we'll come up with something.
Yeah,
and then we would like kind of riff on something, and we play it to him like really quietly, like the instruments that you couldn't hear from the audience that were going direct.
Right.
They would play and be like, "What do you think about that?" And he'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's perfect." I'd be like, "Okay, great. So that's what we'll do."
Yeah.
So I was very collaborative in the moment, but there are many times when they would ask me, I'd be like, no, that's not going to happen.
And what was the thing you used to do? Reggie's Question?
Oh, Reggie's Question.
Yeah. And where did that come from?
That came from Comedy Bang Bang.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
They never said it officially, but it totally came from Comedy Bang Bang because Scott Aukerman would always ask me to ask Reg, do you have a question for the? And then they just took that.
Was Scott upset about that?
I never asked Scott about that. I should ask Scott about that. That'd be kind of interesting. Yeah. I'm sure Scott was like, whatever. I mean, it wasn't my idea. So, I mean, maybe Scott's like, maybe he's like micro harboring this thing, thinking that I took it, but I'm to clear that up with it. But, it was just the same thing. So I would ask a question, just a random improvised question to the guests, and they just let me say whatever. It was. What's
the best question you ever asked?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I think Vulture once like ranked the questions for like a year. Like every year they would release like, a ranking, like the best or whatever. I don't remember because they're always improvised. But I mean, I remember asking Obama about aliens.
No.
The existence of aliens.
Really?
That was cool. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What did he say?
It was the first time apparently in history that I guess technically an American president or former president actually made comments. I think
I remember him kind of going like, there's something there, but he didn't get into it.
Yeah. He was just like, there's phenomena and there are things that are unexplainable, how they move and like why something is able to move like that and those types of things, but we don't know. But, so he was just reaffirming what we already knew, from the footage and stuff like that. But that was pretty cool.
What's your take on alien life? Because it seems like it's bubbling up to the surface in the last couple of years, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. And some people think it's part of a disinformation operation, some kind of thing before something might happen. It's very conspiracy theory. I don't like conspiracy theories so much. I hold them lightly in my hand, but I don't know. It's hard to say if I did this on Rogan. It was so funny when I talked about this on Rogan. The whole time I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And I watched it. I was like, what are you doing? Just fucking talk. But so here's my chance. But I think that it is possible that there is alien life that has visited the planet or has already been here a very long time. And maybe there are remnants of it in some way that are left over. I hold that completely possible, but I also like harder explanations. It's very weird why there's no evidence.
Right.
And I don't think we're that great at suppressing information that this many decades gone by, let's say like 100 years of human whatever existence, can't keep alien technology secret.
Right,
I think that's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And also weird why there just hasn't been a direct communication. So that's weird. There's a lot of questions. Definitely like some of there's that incident that happened, I think it was in South Africa, where there was like an alien craft it was at a school and a bunch of kids found this craft, and there was this being standing outside of the craft, and it was communicating to them telepathically. And they interviewed the kids later, and they all had the exact same story.
Really?
And they had the same description, and they're kids, so like, why would they get together and lie? And it was, they thought what they saw was real. And when I hear things like that, I'm like, wow, that's pretty incredible. But then I zoom away, and then I go into simulation theory. And so if this is a simulation, if this world is, this reality that we're experiencing is some form of a collective simulation, then that's an interesting thing to think about. What are aliens? Are they versions of ourselves? Like different observational forms of ourselves within the simulation?
Yeah.
Are they just put in there as anomalies to make life interesting in the simulation? I don't know. It's kind of strange. I definitely think there's something, because I've seen UFOs in Montana. I think I talk about it in the book.
Yeah.
And I couldn't explain what they were. There was no explanation. I'm not going to say that they were aliens, but I definitely saw something that back in 1986, I don't think we had that technology. Yeah. So I don't know what it is. Or maybe we did have that technology. Maybe we're like what we're seeing today when we see a stealth fighter and a stealth bomber. That's 20 years, 30 years, 40 years behind what we actually have. Yeah. Who knows? Right. But I think it's great. I think that people are talking about it. I just don't want people to get into a conspiracy hole where
I think you got to keep a question mark on everything. I think that this culture today is very emphatic about having opinions, as opposed to saying, hey, here's something we should ponder and question a little bit. We don't know the answer, but
yeah. I mean, I think it's healthy to be open-minded. Yeah. You don't have to believe every stupid thing that someone, especially when it's a fear-based thing. Right. Because conspiracy theories generally, they function off of, it's curiosity, but it's also the desire for something fearful to be real. Right. And I think that's what hooks people, because they get that dopamine rush of like, oh man, it's like, it's all coming in. So it's crashing in on us. There's something out there and it wants to get us. And there's a conspiracy. Yeah. And I just don't believe that humans are smart enough to hold conspiracies to that level. Yeah. I think conspiracies exist.
Yeah. Like the Kennedy assassination. It's like, how many people would have been complicit in that, and none of them really came forward? Yeah,
totally. Or the moon landing. When people are like, the moon landing was staged. It's like, yeah, that is true, but it's also not true. Yes. They had a stage that simulated the moon because they were practicing and they were getting shots and things like that. Right. But we actually did go to the moon. Yes. And people it's so funny. It's just people bending themselves into pretzels, about that. And I'm like, do you know how hard it would be to keep scientists? They're not spies. No. They're scientists. Yeah. They're engineers. And you're gonna hold like 1,000 scientists and engineers you're going to make them not talk about something. Then you doesn't make any sense.
You got a janitor. You got a lot of auxiliary people that are walking around.
Yeah. There's people like putting paper back in the shelves, whatever, restocking things. Like, of course, I don't buy it. Yeah. I don't buy it. There's fun to think about.
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go, but before we go, I like to close out with, it's called Fastballs with Fitz. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to answer it.
Sure.
There's two types of people in the world. Go.
People who wish to know themselves, and people who wish to know themselves, and people who are too lazy to figure that out.
Yeah. Fearful or lazy?
I think it's lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I like it. All right, listen, Reggie Watts' book, I cannot recommend it enough. Great Falls, Montana, Fast Times, Post-Punk Weirdos, and a Tale of Coming Home Again. It's funny. It's rock and roll. It's just, I like it because it's you. You really captured, I think, yourself in a tome, and I look forward to the next one.
Oh man, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You got it.
It was great.
All right.